which is pretty nice.
Just for a minute.
She answers very.
Well, she needs a few $1 million in grants.
Well, the big thing is she has attached her husband's faculty member, so she's going to have to stay where we are. And so, of course, I'm the catch, right? Because when one of your own people grows up like that, faculty tend to be a little more resistant.
Kathy?
You know, usually they, over time,
We can start.
somebody doing their own thing, eventually they go along with it.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I should like to welcome members of the DNA Subcommittee and members of the public to this New York State DNA Subcommittee meeting. For the record, we have 5 members of our subcommittee present, Drs. Batzer, Carmody, Hirsch, Chakraborty and Ballantyne, and one of the subcommittee members, Dr. Walsh, can't make it. So with these 5 members in place, we have a quorum. Okay, so basically, as again, I should like to thank the subcommittee members for attending and giving up their time for this important New York State venture, and I should also like to thank members of the public, mainly representatives from law enforcement and crime laboratories in New York State. So without further ado, since we have a packed agenda and we have a time schedule, I should like to ask the committee to review the proposed agenda that they have in front of them to see whether or not we should proceed as described in the proposed agenda.
A motion approval of the agenda.
So one motion for, any second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Hirsch. Any discussion? All those in favour? Aye. Okay, all members say that we should, at present, say that we should proceed with the agenda as is. So the first true item then of meat in the agenda is the review of the draft minutes from the previous meeting, DNA subcommittee held on March the 5th, 2010. And so the committee has a copy of the draft minutes from that meeting for their perusal. And I'd be happy to hear a motion.
Before the motion, let me make a note which might come up later on. In the minutes, there is no discussion of the subcommittee as a body or any member of the subcommittee gave any technical advice for forensic data interpretation. There is no mention of any such discussion in this minute.
Yes?
And you feel there should be?
No, there was no, the minute reflects there was no such discussion held officially at the subcommittee.
I think this has been brought up. There may be some discussion about this point
Right.
later in the meeting. Okay.
It's not an amendment of the minutes. All I'm saying is the minutes reflect that the subcommittee officially did not discuss any interpretation rules for DNA data interpretation.
You're saying that the minutes accurately reflect that?
Accurately reflects. Correct.
Okay.
Good. The minutes do. So there is a feeling that the minutes accurately reflect the fact that we did not discuss in great detail the DNA interpretation issues. Okay.
I motion approval of the minutes.
Okay. Dr. Chakraborty, there's a motion to approve the minutes as is.
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Hirsch. Any discussion? All those in favour, say aye. Aye. So unanimous approval of the previous minutes. Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is just an announcement, basically, and this announcement pertains to the fact that the DNA subcommittee has currently has a vacancy on its. We have a vacancy, and after discussion and review of candidates, we have appointed, or I have appointed, Dr. Eric Buell from the Vermont State Police Laboratory to be a member of this subcommittee. Unfortunately, he couldn't make this meeting. So in theory, then, because he was appointed prior to this meeting, then my previous comments about there being one absence, Dr. Walsh. In fact, it should say that Dr. Buell was absent because he is actually a member of the committee as of now. So this is just a public announcement that Dr. Buell from Vermont is now on this subcommittee. And hopefully, he will be able to make the next meeting. So that's just an announcement. The next item on the agenda is Nassau County Medical Examiner's Office, Department of Forensic Genetics, and the process that they're going through in terms of them gaining reaccreditation by ASCLD Lab, or in fact getting ASCLD Lab international accreditation.
Jan?
Yes.
Excuse me. I just got an email. Karen Dooling is on her way here, but the trains are running a little bit late, so you might want to do the presentation. So you need presentation first and then discuss, or just a suggestion. Wait till she's here.
Yeah, so the Nassau County there are some documents pertaining to this accreditation or reaccreditation process, and I believe that there is a desire amongst the subcommittee to discuss this briefly, and it would be useful, I think, for Karen Dooling to be here for that discussion. So do I have the subcommittee's approval to delay this presentation or discussion until after the other presentations we have?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's proceed with that then. Come back to Nassau County. So the next item on the agenda then is a presentation from New York City OCME, and Adele Mitchell will give us this presentation. This is on their proposed methodology for reporting statistics for analysis of single-source mixed and degraded evidence samples using a likelihood ratio approach. So without further ado, Adele.
Thank you. So thanks for having me again today. It's good to be back. I'm excited to present our validation results. Got a lot of good stuff to show you.
Want me to do
So
this,
how-
or you want me?
I don't know, it's the easiest way to.
Whatever's easier for you. Want
Will
to
it-
try?
I'll try, unless it bothers you. Then
Just have to hit it.
okay. So I need to push. Oops.
Oh,
And I'll see. I'm already having trouble. So it's not. Okay, so just to remind you, we are interested in, or we've been interested and have developed a statistical method that lets us handle this third situation as far as non-deducible mixtures go. So we're looking at mixtures where we cannot pull out a major contributor, and we're interested in ways to apply a statistic to those mixtures if we have, for example, a suspect to compare to the mixture. So if all of the suspect's alleles are labeled in the mixture, so I'm going to use the word suspect, even though I know a comparison sample isn't necessarily always a suspect, but just for ease. So let's say we have a suspect, we have a mixture, and we have a suspect whose alleles are labeled in the mixture. Then that's an easy situation. We're not too concerned about that. We can do probability of inclusion if we want to. Or if several of the suspect's alleles are missing, or they're not visible, they're not labeled or they're not visible, then we can exclude that person. But the situation that is trickier is if most of the suspect's alleles are seen, and those that are missing maybe below the threshold or can be explained maybe in the stutter position. And then we have a situation where we're not ready to exclude the person, but we can't include them as a possible contributor either because not all of their alleles are labeled. So this is the situation that we've been working on. And we're not the only ones who are interested in putting a statistic on this. Here are two recent publications that are pushing for putting statistics on any positive association. So the NAS report from last year would like to have a statistic on a positive association, and the SWIG-DAM interpretation guidelines for mixtures also mention that, and they in fact put included and cannot be excluded together in the same category as something that needs to have a statistic on it.
Do we reserve the questions later on? Or?
Yeah, so in terms of procedure, perhaps if it's okay for the speaker, would it be possible for the subcommittee members themselves to ask questions as we go along?
Certainly.
But I would ask the members of the public or people sitting who are not members of the subcommittee to hold back on their questions until the end. Is that okay? So, feel free to ask the speaker questions as we go along.
Okay. Can you go back to the
Yes.
last slide?
Uh-huh.
I don't have the NAS report right in front of me, but do you recall whether the NAS report requires that for even low template DNA?
I don't think it was specifically addressed.
It was not specifically
Okay.
addressed.
So a couple of strategies for putting statistics on mixtures. The first very popular method is using probability of inclusion, combined probability of inclusion, which can be used if all the comparison samples alleles are seen in the evidence, but it can't be used if any of them are missing or unlabeled. So for this reason, we are looking at the likelihood ratio. We've developed and validated the likelihood ratio.
Actually, this contradicts your previous slide where you said that if all of the suspects alleles are labeled, you can compute the inclusion probability.
Yes?
But if the mixture contains unlabeled alleles, then not necessarily belonging to the suspect, then how do you
So we computed on all labeled alleles in an evidence profile. So then it certainly doesn't represent everyone who has ever touched the item, for example, if we have a touched item.
No, I'm asking the question the following. Suppose the evidence sample contains labeled as well as unlabeled alleles.
Okay.
And the suspect's alleles happens to be all labeled.
Mm-hmm.
When you are computing the exclusion probability, what question are you answering?
We are asking the question, what fraction of randomly selected individuals could be a contributor to the labeled alleles in this mixture?
It's a different question than original concept of exclusion probability.
Right.
Correct. You have to specify
Okay.
that.
All right, so the likelihood ratio is not something that we've come up with, something that's used universally, as well as in many forensic applications. For example, the random match probability is the reciprocal of a likelihood ratio. CODIS Pop Stat software can perform mixture analysis using a likelihood ratio framework. It's the method of choice for kinship calculations, and we particularly are interested in it because allele dropout and drop-in can be included in the model. So modeling allele dropout and drop-in is not something specific to forensics. It's something that is an important issue in all kinds of genetic analysis. So here are some examples of linkage and or association analysis methods that allow for allele dropout or drop-in, as well as haplotype inference programs that also let alleles have spuriously appeared or not appeared. And there's quite a history of modeling dropout and drop-in in forensics analysis. So here are some papers talking about these things. Specifically, I'd like to point out this paper here, Curran et al., and this paper here. The method that we're presenting today is very, very similar to this. One big difference between them is that we've used empirical data to estimate dropout rates and drop-in. So this program, which is not commercially available, but it would require the user to specify a dropout rate. Whereas we've estimated those in actual samples. So as I mentioned before, software to do a likelihood ratio calculation with drop-in and drop-in is not currently commercially available. We've developed and validated our own software. This is the same thing that we've been talking about the last couple times that we've been here. So we were here in November 2009 to describe the method, and then in March 2010 to talk about the drop-in and drop-in data and to present you with our proposed validation plan. And now today we have results for you. And these are results that are contained on this CD that we sent, dated May 7th. So it's the second of the two that we sent. After sending the first one, we realized that pieces of it had not made it onto the CD. So it's important that if you're going to look things up, use the second one. The first part of the CD, the methods and the volume 1, is the same. Things were not left out of volume 1, and that's also the section that was printed for you. So there's no change to that. It's just that a lot of the reference material was incomplete in the first version. So please use the second. Okay, so we demonstrate that we call it FST, the Forensic Statistical Tool. If anybody has a catchier name, let me know. That our forensic statistical tool reliably assigns a quantitative value to comparisons between evidence and comparison samples. So we've demonstrated sensitivity and concordance with our manual interpretation of evidence profiles, as well as reproducibility. We've tested over 200 mock casework samples. Some of them are touched, and some of them are buccal swabs, buccal swab mixtures. We've performed over 900 comparisons between evidence profiles and comparison samples, and we've performed over 100,000 comparisons to a database, a population database of individuals. These are post-mortem samples, so these people had no contact with our mock evidence samples, and we've tested our evidence against those samples to see what kind of values we expect from our statistic if we've got the wrong person in there. And so this is really important. We're going to focus a lot on this today, showing what the results look like if you don't have the right person. Oops. Okay. And finally, we've translated the likelihood ratio into a p-value using this distribution. And I'll talk a bit about this. I think that this is a more intuitive way to present results to a lay audience. The likelihood ratio doesn't have, in my opinion, it's not very intuitive. I think it's difficult to explain. I think it's easier to explain a p-value. So that's how we propose presenting the results. Okay, so first I'll quickly summarize the massive amount of material that we have in the validation study. We have 36 3-ring binders. They're about 3 or 4 inches each. So I will also summarize some manual calculations that we did to show that the program is working correctly, and to address Dr. Chakraborty's question about dropout rate independence between loci. And then I'll show you the program testing that we did with some deliberate mixtures and touched items and purposely degraded samples. So the first volume contains methods and sample calculations, as well as testing of the program to make sure that it's doing the calculations that it's supposed to be doing. And here's also where we show our null distributions for the likelihood ratio statistics. The next few volumes, 2 through 8, are where we've estimated dropout and drop-in rate in our samples. And we've already presented results from this to you here, as well as 9 and 10, in which we're looking at 3-person mixtures. The previous volumes were single source and 2-person. In volumes 11 and 12, we're looking at dropout and drop-in in purposely degraded samples using UV degradation. And this is where we also looked at peak height ratios between the largest and the smallest locus in each identifier color to be able to identify a degraded sample by the characteristics of the electropherogram. In the next volumes, we've analyzed quite a few profiles from two-person mixtures where we have one degraded contributor. And we've done some more with degradation. These are still in progress, these volumes, where we further explore degradation. We have included some degraded samples in our testing so far, but to this point, the program does not do anything differently for a degraded sample. We are working on a module where dropout rates will be increased at the particular loci that are most affected by degradation. That is not in place yet. So all the analysis today is with the standard module, but we show that that is effective for degraded samples. And then we start to move into our touched items here. One-person, two-person touched items and purposeful mixtures, three-person touched items and purposeful mixtures, and four-person touched items. Then we've got a volume specifically addressing independence of dropout among loci. And then finally we look at what happens to the model if we include a known profile in there, for example, a victim profile. All right, so I'll quickly show you the manual calculations that we did to check the functioning of the program. So when we were estimating dropout rates, we used specific quantities of DNA. For single-source samples, they ranged from 6.25 to 500 picograms, and for mixtures, from 25 to 500 picograms. But evidence samples, as you know, don't come in those quantities. So what FST does is let's say that our sample has 30 picograms of DNA in it. It'll take the dropout rates for 25 and 50 picograms and interpolate for the 30. So we did 30 intermediate quantities